Happy to convene this, I believe, the last warrant committee meeting of the season. First order of business is to accept the minutes of the last meeting, which you have received electronically. Are there any changes to that? I have a motion to accept them as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Our next order is a discussion of Hendry's. We have Mike Dennehy and we have members of the Board of Selectmen to answer any remaining questions before we talk about the transfer of the remaining funds to the account to satisfy the obligation we have. So, Mike, Katie, Mr. Wells, it's all you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I think I really need to thank this committee for the work that they did through the entire budget process. I can't say it enough. When I walked in the door 18 months ago, we were faced with two budgets, contingent, non-contingent, potential override. It was a very arduous task. I think we drew upon that, and this committee did an exemplary job in the year after the override with what was a balanced budget, but there was a lot of due diligence done both at the subcommittee level and at this table with the committee. So as the town administrator, and I know I can speak on behalf of my board, thank you for all the work that you did.
Thank you for helping and affecting a lot of the budget progress.
Yeah, and there's still work to be done. I think we can all agree that there's still some work to be done.
But the process has become professionalized, and we're very grateful for the work that you do. So you make our job a little easier as well. So thank you very much. Anyway, there have been significant questions about Hendry's and the role of the State Department of Environmental Protection, the progress or lack of progress that has happened on the project that I think has stymied all of us. I know there are some questions around the table, but if you want to just talk about what is happening, what has happened, what we expect, that may satisfy.
So on April 22nd, the three of us came to this committee and asked for $397,445, which was authorized by two previous warrant committees and two town meetings. It was appropriated in Article 42 of the 2017 town meeting warrant. I didn't think we'd be back here. I thought we would have finished the project this morning. And work would have been completed and maybe had some money to put back into the town's coffers. Both of those did not take place. So there has not been any demolition that has taken place. The reason for that I can get to later, not later, but shortly after I let you know why we're here tonight. We are here tonight because Article 42 of annual town meeting 2017 asks for those funds. There is no article in the FY19 warrant that just passed. Sorry, I said FY17, it's FY18. So that 197,445, which is the difference between the $200,000 that this committee authorized us, which was then sent to the T and is sitting in their force account, dying to be spent. We're looking for that additional funding because if the fiscal year ends, there was no warrant article, as this committee knows, authorizing those funds for fiscal year 19. Having said that, we do anticipate this building coming down in the near future. There was a hiccup with some paperwork that some of which had been filed with the State Department of Environmental Protection, which needed some more vetting by its new supervisor, Peter Seward. There's been constant communication both from the developer, his contractor, and my office to them to try to make sure we have everything. Subsequently, the T needed a week prior to the diversion taking place to ready themselves, work on the cantilevers, protect their lines, stuff like that. That was May 18th, a week ago Friday at noontime. The DEP paperwork was not entirely vetted, and the T could not sign off on that diversion weekend, which would have been this past weekend. So there is a conversation going on with the developer, his contractor, and the DEP tomorrow at noontime. I'll stay abreast of that and report any findings to the chair or this group. I tend to keep my board as involved as I can be with that. The T is, they've mentioned a reluctancy to having a diversion on 4th of July weekend, but that's something that if the paperwork can be filed, again, we're talking about a 3 to 5 week pre-demo. it would get us right somewhere in the middle of the
I
summertime.
don't see how you could possibly do that on the 4th of July weekend.
Very hard.
Yeah,
I don't,
Very hard.
that
yeah,
would
they're
seem
frowning upon the
insane.
4th of
very
July.
hard.
That would
Right.
seem insane.
Yeah. We would aim for probably the week after, which a couple of things would have to take place in the near future for that to happen. But I think we all want this building down quickly and efficiently. The DEP wants it down environmentally as safely as possible. And the developer cannot touch that building until all this paperwork is finalized. So we're still in a bit of a holding pattern, but there are conversations going on. Peter Seawood from DEP has been communicating back to me with stuff. I will continue to be the conduit if it helps things. But, you know, I think we all agree Labor Day is too far away. Sometime after the 4th of July and between Labor Day.
So technically, the money has to be transferred during this fiscal year, which is before June 30th.
Yes.
So your authorization has to happen relatively quickly.
Yeah, it could actually happen a little bit into July, because don't we have
You have to-
15
Sometimes you
days?
have a 10 or 15
15
day
days.
window.
15 days.
Yeah, but we don't want to.
Yeah, you probably don't wanna do it.
We're going to do it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
We
And the
have-
town accountant has checked with an advisory team that we use, that money does not have to go directly to the MBTA force account. We can hold that in abeyance and not violate any
That's
Massachusetts
one of the
general laws.
questions that I had
Yeah,
had
that
for
was-
you. That we can hang on to it, it can stay
We can
there
hold on to
before we
it
transfer
until they
it.
ask for it. Yep.
That's,
I agree.
that's,
That makes a big difference.
makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions, any other questions for the selectmen or for Mr. Dennehy? Tom?
Mike, is it possible to be a little more specific in terms of what the problem is with DEP and what their concerns are?
So it was all the asbestos abatement that went on in the building. They got samples from the contractor that was taken in 2013 and
Yeah.
14, and the paperwork has changed. The filing process with DEP has changed, so that was one of them. They wanted samples, but they now want a blueprint of the building to know that where those samples came from, to make sure that the entire building is cured of that material. Otherwise, they'll have to consider other parts of the building having not been abated.
Maggie?
That shouldn't be
Oh,
that
sorry.
big an issue
Yeah.
to
No, it's
resolve.
just, some of it was finding the paperwork. We checked with the Conservation Commission, because there was some filings that took place there. They don't have it. So the developer is working with the environmental contractor that he used at that time to secure that stuff and provide it to Mr. Seawood, who, at this point in time, is thoroughly crossing his Ts and dotting his Is, so. Has nothing to do with anything else in the building. We got a list of stuff submitted
Yeah.
from the developer, and then a
They
list
didn't
of...
find any toxins buried anywhere, and there's
No.
no contamination of
It's
the river they're worried
strictly
about?
the asbestos abatement of
Okay.
the roofing.
Maggie?
So I guess, is this things that the DEP requested of the developer previously?
Correct.
But now the delay, it seems, it's because probably the developer did not respond. And if that's the case, the force agreement, I don't even know if it's executed. It doesn't make any type of issue, it doesn't protect the town by stating if the delay is called by no fault of the town or of the developer, that he's going to be paying for those costs. The demolition is all on the town's dollar. I don't understand why there's not some type of provision to protect the tax dollars stating if the developer feels that the town is only going to pay what's incurred at this cost. I'm sure there's gonna be additional monies because of this delay.
But there
So
hasn't been any cost incurred.
why wouldn't that be in there?
There's no cost at all, though.
What?
There's been no cost at all of any type.
What happens if it's delayed longer? You see the history. Who's gonna pay, the town?
So we don't own the building any longer. So
I
this is
know.
our last fiduciary responsibility, is just.
But you still have to pay the demo costs.
So let's clarify that. We're not paying the demolition costs.
Right.
What the board committed to pay in the negotiations with the developer a couple of years ago was to pay the cost of the MBTA diversion, not the demolition cost. The developer is paying for the demolition cost. So no fees have been charged by the MBTA to date because the diversion has not happened. So I think we should be careful to just kind of limit the scope of what we're really talking about here.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there's a delay, there's reasons for the delay, but what we're really here to do is to encumber the funds, just as we said at town meeting, to encumber the funds so that come July 1, they don't flow into free cash next year, and then we need a town meeting vote next fall to try to appropriate it. That's really what we're trying to do here.
But I think we all want to do the same thing, but I recall on our last meeting, when you were before us, we asked for quotes, we asked for backup, and you specifically said you didn't have anything. Now, when we
Only on the
finally,
force, only on what Katie's referring to.
but when we got our, let me just finish, we got our information, I'm seeing quotes that go back from January and February, for the $414,000. So that information was there. We weren't looking for a contract. We were just looking for things that we could review before we said, here's $200,000. We were doing our due diligence. We were not giving you a hard time, as you stated during one of your selectmen's meeting about how we disrespected you. We're doing what we're supposed to do. We have to ask questions. We're doing our due diligence just like you are.
Oh, I have another question
I
over
was
here.
just going to say, Mr. Chairman, maybe a point of order that these current questions might be out of scope to the
We're getting a little bit off message.
diversion, and perhaps we could table them till afterwards.
Yeah, because they have a meeting that they have to be at. Does anyone have a question directly related to the release of the funds?
I do.
Tom?
Okay. In terms of the process, just so we all understand it, clearly, I agree that the town accountant can encumber the funds, which will make it basically, quote-unquote, accounts payable. You know, it's the closest thing that, you know, municipal accounting you have to an accounts payable. So that it can be paid with 2007, 18 money, yeah, fiscal 18 money. So if we release it, I guess, what account does it go in that it becomes available funds? I mean, town meeting hasn't freed it up, obviously.
So we have a special account number that it's associated with, the same as the $200,000 that was released earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got an account number on there, and then we take the money from that account number and send it to the
Okay.
force account.
So once that goes out, it is spendable money,
Correct.
regardless of whether it's spent before the end of the fiscal year or after the end of the
Yes.
fiscal year.
Oh, that's good.
Chris?
It's money that's
Yes,
available.
that's
to
the
be
way I
spent.
am it, yep.
Chris?
Just out of curiosity, that's an interest-bearing account?
The T one?
The account in which
Yeah.
these funds are being paid?
It's a special revenue fund, the way it's listed, so I would assume it's an interest-bearing one, but I'd have to ask the town accountant.
I'm just curious what happens I mean, probably negible at the end of the day for a couple of months.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah.
If that.
I'll get back to you on that one.
It's basically,
You don't have
I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically a transfer from the reserve fund budget to the selectmen's budget, and we'll just put it in a special account that the accountant is maintaining, or the treasurer is maintaining, one of the two of them is maintaining. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is now either, is where it sits
No,
right
the
now.
reserve
I
fund
don't
is not
think
invested
It's
yet.
not invested now.
I don't know that we require a vote on this because we already voted on it.
I just have one question. Is the contract with the MBTA executed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so if there is no objection.
Wait,
Oh,
one more?
Go ahead.
I'm curious, maybe you can correct me, because you keep referring to is it the 2017 annual town meeting, Article 42 for the, when is it, the 397. But if you go back to previous years, in the town meeting in May of 2015, we, on Article 39, we voted to approve $450,000 to cover demo.
We're not here for anything else other than what, one
No, but I'm just,
specific.
and then the 397 in 2016 was carried forward. I'm just curious why we're not referring back to those articles and we just start back from the 2017.
I think
I'm
I can
sure you
answer that,
know.
and Tom might be able to assist me answering that. I looked back at those today as well, Maggie. So you're right, that in 2015, what was appropriated to the reserve fund was $450,000 for Henry's. At the time, we were not talking about diversion money. We were talking about demolishing the town's portion of the property if we would have to pay prevailing wage and demolish it as a town, not the private developer demolishing it. In 2016, so that money did not, it was not transferred forward like we did from 16 to 17. So in 15 to 16, there was not a rollover. There was $397,445, which was free cash, which I think was just an available amount of free cash that we set aside for the Henry's demolition. There was you have to keep in mind, during these years, 14, 15, 16, a lot of different negotiations going on, a lot of different possibilities for this
Right.
property going on. So we rolled it forward from 16 to 17, and in both, the comments that are in the warrant specifically reference that this would be for the
Yes.
Henry's demolition. Now, I know I think at the last meeting, there's a question about extraordinary or unforeseen, which is what the normal reserve fund expenditures are for, but this money really isn't for an unforeseen or an extraordinary amount. It really was just parked in the reserve fund for lack of a better place to put it. We could have parked it in the selectmen's budget, but by agreement with the Warrant Committee and different selectmen and different people who were involved in the process, we parked it in the reserve fund.
Back in 17.
Well, 15, 16, 17,
initially,
yeah.
yeah.
So you changed it, okay, that makes a little bit more sense then. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think if I have the sense of the committee right, we'll be able to execute, and I'll stop by and sign it, and we'll be done.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm sorry we kept you a little longer, but we appreciate you coming very much.
Thank you.
Mike, I'm sure Mike will update you as well if you.
And when he does, I usually update
No
the
one wants
committee.
this more than we do.
May I ask one question? So, and I know we're not here for the
Demolition?
demolition, but we're talking about asbestos, some serious business about abating. And if the developer and/or the contractor doesn't have sort of the documentation, I mean, are we talking about a serious issue with DEP, that there's a public sort of process that DEP, because I know the EPA will identify a hot spot and they'll post it on their website and they'll talk about the issue, and so that the general public, like people who live in that section of East Milton, might have some concerns about knowing that this thing is coming down. There's some serious asbestos, and are we doing anything to kind of inform the public about the issue? And then seeing there's a delay, most people might be a little fearful that there's something bad going on.
Right.
So I mean, and this has nothing to do with.
I had the same question. I asked that
The
exact
money,
same
but it's
question.
about, the issue of asbestos being abated and,
Yeah.
flying in the air and all that other kind of stuff. So just something to be thinking
Sure.
about.
No, and a very good question, and it's something that I believe this committee was privy to an email back and forth from the DEP, and then I made a phone call to him after that. This is not that case. This is just trying to take a look and identify where the samples were taken from and make sure that all that material, when knocked down and the dust flies, that it's not something that, as you said, is a hot building, so.
It's actually a more conservative
Yeah.
approach, and I appreciate it, my side, even though it's frustrating for the exact reason you refer to the public safety and the neighborhood safety issue. I'd rather have them do it right than not.
Yeah, and just further to that, because I just want to make sure we clarify the whole picture. The developer abated asbestos on the roof of the building, the portion that they owned a few years ago. They abated the asbestos on the town roof fairly recently. This is a documentation issue with the DEP, and if it turns out that there's more areas that need to be tested or anything like that, then the developer's going to have to deal with that. But right now, our understanding is it's a documentation issue.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Last comment.
Just a comment, I think that when at your last selectmen's meeting, when Mike Sulis asked the question, that's when you explained what the delay was, and the minute you mentioned asbestos, you have a lot of the residents, as he said, they're worried and concerned, so I think because you are elected officials and you are the only people that can answer all of these questions, that you really might want to think about having another public meeting so you can hear the people's issues and problems and complaints. That's just my own personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is consideration of a payment in lieu of taxes program that has been swirling around the town for some time. And I wanted to introduce this as a Warrant Committee subject for our consideration during our next deliberations in the next year, because there are issues that we have here in town that have been discussed about generating revenue, and that we're so heavily property tax dependent. Somehow to diversify our sources of revenue is not a bad idea. Many other towns have discussed payment in lieu of taxes. Boston, of course, is a very active one. Many of the universities and not-for-profits participate. Nobody's suggesting that we're going to try and take advantage of our not-for-profits here in town, but there are services that they use, and there has been a significant discussion in many quarters about asking them to subsidize some of these payments. Tom?
I agree that as a warrant committee, we probably should understand what is going on, but they have there is an agreement, there is a pilot, there was a committee set up.
Yes.
They developed a pilot program model kind of after Boston's. They got the input from all of the
Participants, yeah.
the not-for-profits in town. Because we're not Boston, we don't have a proliferation of large nonprofits. We got like 3 or 4 of them.
Concentrated, right.
And all they have to do
Yeah.
is all band together and just say, no, and
Right.
it's not going to happen.
Right.
So it is very difficult. But I think we should probably hear from, there's an implementation committee that's been
Yes.
established.
Yes.
So yes, I think we should hear from
I
the committee.
wanted to get
I don't
this-
think we should try and reinvent a wheel.
No, certainly not, and that's not the intention. The intention is to bring that to our attention as a discussion item
Yeah, no,
for
I
our
agree.
next series of deliberations, to have it as part of the agenda at some point, to understand what's going on and to, what extent we can expect participation, and if there will be a meaningful impact on the town's revenues as a result, because anytime we can find money to get things done for everybody's benefit is not a bad day.
Yeah, I agree.
So I wanted to put that on. And then the next item that we have on the agenda is to discuss the purview of what we want to look at next year with respect to the budget preparations and reserve accounts. This is kind of the feedback that we got at the town meeting, where we had requests for certain revelation and certain sharing of reserve accounts and other budget items that weren't, I think, a couple of people brought it up at the town meeting, weren't properly illustrated in the warrant, which had been requested in years past. I think we have to be very sure that we get that request into the department heads, so that the town accountant and the town administrator and the department heads are aware that the warrant committee wants to incorporate those. So having that information available to us early enough to incorporate into next year's warrant for the town meeting, the annual town meeting, will satisfy the questions that were asked at this past town meeting. And I wondered, is there any reason? Go ahead, Tom. You have the history on
I
this.
know, you
Yeah,
know it.
well, I mean, most of it was around revolving funds and
Right.
activity in revolving funds.
right.
Which is a good question to
Yeah,
ask.
sure.
I think a lot of that is in the report of the town.
Yes.
It is, I think, what the questions that when I was taking my notes, the questions were specific to the actual budget line items, what's in the revolving accounts. We should know what's there, and rather than ask people to
Yes.
go and ferret through the different, not everybody knows how to read financial statements. I think they wanted them segmented out so they could see them, and I don't know how practical that is for the budget heads to do. I think it shouldn't be that difficult, but I want a sense of how we would want it to be presented too.
They might be able to provide or develop an executive summary of this is what happened.
Something like that
I guess
might
you
be
could.
helpful.
Bullet
As
points,
a-
just as
And
a-
just put it as one of the
Just,
tables.
yeah,
an
just to
amendment or
summarize
something.
it, yeah, just a small, and we're talking about
appendix.
presentation more than
Yes.
content here, I think.
Yes.
And that,
A reference.
it would answer the question, and
Yeah.
Yes.
that's a very good idea.
Yes, just as a,
But, because of that, it's funny, it's interesting, because I did review previous town warrants. If you really go far back, there's some interesting formats if you're talking about it.
Yeah.
Then if you look at other communities that are similar, you get so many different ideas as far as how to present it the best way. It's some great
Very.
info.
Yeah, but they vary all over the place, and we
Yes.
might have gotten away because we've been absorbed with other things, but I think to focus back wouldn't be a bad idea. So
Yeah.
I think if we can add that into the request as we start to prepare for next year.
Yeah, I mean, we should have I'm sort of half joking when I say this, a warrant best practices
Well,
subcommittee.
yeah, well, I mean, that might not be a bad idea, too. We can at least look at that early on so that we're not blindsided next when we go back into this process.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There you go.
My wife wants
There you go.
Now, let's see, who
That's
isn't
right.
here?
I
And we'll
know,
figure
right?
out.
Well,
But that question was asked by a couple of stakeholders at town meeting, who historically ask that question every year. And I think it is a good one, I agree. So, maybe we should put it back on the town administrator to sit down with those couple of stakeholders and find out exactly what they're looking for. I mean, do they want a summary of the expenditures? I mean, obviously, the revolving fund takes all revenue,
Oh, yeah.
whatever it is, from that particular source.
Oh, yeah. No, it can
It's
be
only limited on how much you can expend.
exactly right. And so it could be very complex after a fashion.
Right. So you can certainly summarize what the expenditures were for the
Right.
prior year. you know, and
Yeah, I don't know that they want itemizations to that level of detail, but I think that's not a bad suggestion to
always
see
just be
exactly
careful what you wish for.
their fight is here.
I mean, that could be discussed in subcommittee conversation.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
more of the detail
Yep.
discussed
As
in
so many other
subcommittees.
things were when we went through it this
And
year.
then roll it up more on summary level for
That's
the
not,
public.
that's a
general
possibility
public.
as well.
Right.
Okay,
The other thing was multi-year budgeting,
yep.
Oh,
right?
yes.
We wanted to.
Five-year plan, they're looking
yeah,
for updates, that's
if
right.
we
Remember
could-
they were asking?
right, we have to get that, we have to make sure we put pressure on, it's not our job, that's.
No,
Right.
that's-
no,
that's the town
our job is
administrator.
not to come up with it, it's
You
to
know,
justify it.
To follow an actual
Because
five-year
didn't they
plan
want a
rather
whole
than
thing in
annual.
schools, what's going to happen?
That's-
where
We spent a lot of time 2 years ago coming up with a 5-year
Yeah,
financial
sorry.
forecast. Spent hours and hours
Oh,
and
yeah,
hours.
I'm sure.
on it.
It's a big
And I was-
project.
There was nobody more disappointed than me when I heard we didn't have time to do
I
it.
know,
I mean, I think that was the worst answer I've ever heard.
Well,
To be
can
perfectly
I,
honest.
can I ask a question on that? Because I think Carol bringing up a good point, and Kevin, if you raised it. Is it something where we would be asking, who would we be asking to be giving us projections and when?
The town administrator.
And
Clearly.
at the beginning of the warrant year, or?
It's probably the best time to do it
Yeah.
when before things get rolling. So I can bring that up with him.
Yeah.
Because I know that he's making revisions
Yes.
to the administration to contemplate a financial professional to actually do that. That would have the roles kind of a chief financial officer. I know that has been discussed. I think there has to be a little bit of maneuvering internally to get that in place, because an accountant will tell you a lot of things, but the purview is not necessarily to come up with a financial forecast all the time. And so having that function isn't a bad one.
It would not have been that difficult. We already had the financial forecast in place. We already had the format for it.
Uh-huh.
It
Oh, really?
really is just a matter of getting the department heads together to think in terms
do
of, you know, we're talking level service budget.
Yeah.
How- You know, what are you
What do you
gonna
need? What
need,
do you need?
department head, to maintain your
Yeah.
department
Yeah.
level service for the next 5 years?
Jonathan,
And
did you have
work
a
on it.
question or a comment?
Is there any way, I mean, to dampen a little bit of the effort involved here to, or there are certain things that, do we really need a 5-year forecast for certain?
For the cemetery?
Let's call it what it is.
I don't know,
You want police,
or-
you want fire, you want schools.
Yeah.
Oh, in other words,
Well,
just limit what we
that's
have.
more strategic planning as opposed, the forecast is basically, you need all the departments, otherwise it's not a
'cause that's-
forecast.
whatever
You
spend
do
money
need to
on,
have
you
some
need
sense of
forecast
what's
for it.
happening, but I think you bring a good point up. There are priorities that are going to be more pressing.
Like, just to not weigh on the town administrator and the department heads, I mean, at some level, some of the lower budgets, you can say, roll it forward, you know, do a historical.
Yeah,
sure.
And straight line it,
Probably
kind of,
good.
Yeah.
Two-thirds of
can.
the budget
Yeah.
doesn't need that
Yeah.
much attention year after year.
Well, hold on, so, I mean, I think that sounds right to me, although, if that's also the case, and it's not gonna be that burdensome on the town administrator to just
Right.
roll it forward for the more simple budgets, I take the point. I mean, I think really as
We're talking about department heads and people like me.
Yeah, who are actually there running it.
Right.
I think that there's going to be greater complexity, for example, with the schools, given the demographics that we heard, at great detail about schools, the cost of the fire department expansion. So, and I think insurance is going to be a very big variable because that's all over the place, depending on what liabilities are being discussed.
And am I right, I mean, it seems to me part of the virtue of doing this, because I think part of what you're pointing to, Jonathan, is that we don't want this to be sort of a spinning your wheels exercise.
Yeah.
Right.
But it seems to me part of the virtue of doing this isn't just to help us to interrogate the current budget, but it's also, I mean, I think it might become easier to sort of identify, like, when's an override year gonna come. In other words,
Yes.
like.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's one of the objectives.
Yeah.
To be anticipatory and to say, oh geez, we're going to come up.
All right,
you
sorry, I'm
know,
behind the eight ball. And,
No, no,
yeah,
but
that
I
can
think
show some part.
this is the deer going through. This is the deer going through the boa constrictor. When does it get digested?
It is to a very large degree that, but it's also to take a look at, what's it gonna cost to maintain level service? And we all know that trying to maintain level service in this town is extremely difficult, if even possible.
Yes.
So what?
It's a challenge for sure.
What's the social cost of not maintaining level service? I mean, and how close can we get to it? I mean, those are all decisions that can be made
But-
once you see what the numbers look like.
I agree with this, and I think this is probably a very good discussion point for us to continue early on in our,
Oh, yeah,
before
yeah.
we get to the actual looking at the budget and the warrant for next year, and to incorporate it into the presentation to the town meeting, perhaps even at the special town meeting, if there is going to be one in October. This may be a good time to do that.
More time.
We have a little more time, and the concentration will be focused on preparation, and so that the budget chiefs in the different departments and the department heads and the town administrator will at least have a sense of this is how we think we should be looking, and we want to make this simpler for everybody, not more difficult, and this exercise would hopefully do that. Chris?
If I can just suggest as a practical matter, and it sounds like you'd be in agreement, that for our first meeting, that after we vote on whoever the officers are going to be, assuming that we're all reappointed by the moderator, that this be the first item on the agenda.
I think that's a very good
Yeah.
suggestion.
I agree. I totally agree.
July something?
Yeah, probably.
The first meeting.
The concept of having a five-year plan, implementation of, a discussion of the mechanics of implementation of a five-year plan.
Tom, do you
financial
remember
plan.
what the last 5-year plan was through? I mean, I remember.
It was 2 years, well, one wasn't done last year, one was done,
2 years or 3
2
years
years,
ago?
I think it's 2 years ago.
Years ago?
So it's like for 3 additional
Yeah,
years?
and it was a committee of Glenn Pavlichuk, Amy, Anne Marie Fagan was the town administrator at the
Okay.
time. I was kind of the one behind it and wanting it to happen, so I sat in on it, not as a contributing member per se, but just to kind of.
For the warrant committee or for the select?
For the selectmen.
For the select.
And it really went quite well.
Yeah,
It,
no. I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, I
I'll talk to Mike about that and suggest that maybe we should do something like that. As I say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to make this burdensome or onerous, but I think it is something that is not a bad exercise to
Right.
do for the good of the town.
The state has a 5-year template out there
Even
that
better.
is
Yeah.
absolutely
Tinker
incredible
with
if you
that.
want to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there.
Which will self-populate with all historic information.
Can you send that template around? Do you have?
Yeah, isn't that what you
It's
sent
out
that
there.
to us?
Would Amy have that template, for example? I bet she would. Amy
She might.
Dexter? Yeah. I can ask.
I'll see if I can, I'll check around.
If you
it,
can find
because
any
they
source,
keep
send it
changing the
around, yeah.
website, so trying to find stuff on the website
State,
becomes.
yeah.
Didn't you forward something to all of us, and that had a lot of information from when we went to that meeting last fall? It had a lot of information on that CD where
Yeah,
you
the
could.
town government.
Yeah.
So much information on that, really helpful, Tom.
Yep.
if Anyone looks at it, yeah.
If Amy doesn't
Okay.
have one, I'm sure she's contacted DOR.
That's all that I have. We
Yeah.
have no new business. I don't think we have new business.
No, but I just have a comment. We used to, in previous years, the minutes of the meeting, I don't know, are we going to now try to at least update somewhat to have, we went without any minute meetings, at least to have what was on the agenda briefly. I know you hand wrote
Yeah.
are we
Right.
going to be updating that? I think it's important just to have something in the record.
We should, yeah.
And then
we
also
should.
the reserve fund, every single week before the, on the minutes of the meeting, there used to be the dollar amount of the reserve fund balance. I think that's just kind of a good thing to have, so if it changes, you might be able to see what's going on and it will be brought to your attention.
Yeah, we didn't have much reserve fund
Yeah,
activity this
exactly.
year.
Yeah, otherwise I
Hardly
could
any.
have done
Right.
it. Not that no, we didn't actually.
Did we talk about item 6, the assessor's office?
We did not.
No.
That's why, well,
Why do you say
Terribly sorry.
He said, no, that you better talk about it.
Terribly sorry.
Came out
It's
here.
like listening to us saying, when am I coming?
Shame on me, my fault.
Oh, my
No, it's not a problem. Please come sit, have a seat,
I
and
have a brief statement.
please go ahead.
I'd like to read, and then if there's some questions afterwards, I can answer some questions if you have any. So good evening, my name is Bob Bushway, I'm the chief appraiser for the town. I also serve as the department head in the assessor's office. I come here tonight to request approval of an appraisal technician position. This position's primary responsibility will be the on-site inspection of residential building permits and also sales verifications. It will replace a patchwork of mediocre contracted work and will fill a void that most communities fund in-house. As you know, property tax revenue is the backbone of the town's revenue, and treating the taxpayer of Milton with fair and equitably is always our primary goal. The addition of this position will ensure more accurate data and also the insurance that the town is collecting new growth tax revenue from the tremendous volume of new building and improvements to existing structures. In addition to the needs of this position, we'll actually save money through a series of cost-saving measures. For example, our senior administrative clerk has recently taken a similar position across the hall in the town clerk's office, and one of her primary responsibilities was the manual data entry of all building permit data from the Inspectional Services Department software into the assessors software. So right now, we're in the process of fully automating that task with electronic data transfer from one program to another. So we will remain a 3-person office. So I've also done a cost-benefit analysis, demonstrated cost savings by reducing funds allocated currently for my data collection program in the reval funding line. So my estimated cost savings would be about $11,000 for fiscal year 2019 by bringing this new person on and reducing some of my contracted work figures. So I think it's kind of a win-win. The Personnel Board approved this at their last meeting on Monday, May 21st. I also want to thank Paige Ippolito, who's helped me framework the position and slated the pay scale. Mike Dennehy's been on board with it, and of course the Board of Assessors, who I work for. Bill Bennett, the chair, Brian Cronin, vice chair, and Jim Anderson are all in favor of this position.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Bob, so in my understanding, you would not replace the clerk. You would just have still the same number of people in your department. Just
Yes.
instead of a clerk, it would be this.
More of a yeah, so basically the department over the past 30 years, it really hasn't changed that much. There's always been a couple of clerks in my position.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years with technology, some of the clerical tasks have become automated.
Yep.
So I've, looked at it since I've been here, and I've used this model in other towns I've worked in. And by having somebody in-house doing the inspections, somebody that I can oversee on a daily basis instead of a vendor coming in and they're trying to blow out the work in 2 weeks. It's really, I don't think it's the best way to go. So I actually kind of pushed this a couple of years ago. Personnel Board asked me to, they were they liked the idea of this position, but they didn't want to add an additional person to the office. So once one of my clerks left, gave me the opportunity to roll it back out.
So what would the inspector physically do, just out of curiosity?
So they would get basically a stack of all the building permits that have been issued from the building department, and they go out and measure and list. They'll add the additions, any improvements that have made to property. That's all counted in the tax levy as new growth.
Yep.
So we want to make sure that we're capturing
As much new growth.
Everything's verified.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of excited about this.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Maggie?
I think I asked Joe Prondak, I think about this a year or so ago, and it's because of the people at you don't have all of the personnel. We all know if you see a house for sale, but you go to the tax records, it shows 3 bedrooms, but maybe they have 4. It doesn't show an updated kitchen, or it shows 1 bathroom, but they have 2, so they're not paying full property taxes. And the town, we're trying to figure out additional ways to make extra money. Would that be something this new person could do? Go into people's houses and, I know that
Well, that's exactly what the purpose is.
Yeah.
I mean, right now,
Catch it when they're being
Well,
paid.
Maggie, one thing, a lot of those are because people didn't pull building permits in the first
know.
place. I'm not sure you would catch that necessarily.
But if you pulled the permit, you have the verification.
Had pulled a proper building permit.
Exactly.
And after it's inspected,
Yeah.
he would then go and inspect to change the assessed value.
And we're
of the
also,
property.
exactly. We also use the internet quite a bit because you can find a lot
Oh, I bet.
on MLS and Zillow and Redfin.
Right.
So I have a
Yeah,
question.
it's, it's a great tool, and, 20 years ago, it was, if you didn't get in, you didn't know what was in there,
Yeah.
so.
I have a question just kind of out there. So, let's say I'm a realtor and I'm selling a house and I go check the taxes and see that this house is not assessed and has so much additional items. I don't know what it would take to try to have that brought up to par, and a person could not sell maybe their house until the town had the correct tax information, so it could be assessed correctly, and maybe you imagine all of the additional revenue we might be able to generate that way. I have no clue if that, something like that could ever work. I don't know, just putting it out there.
Well, that's something that so this position will
I'm
help
not sure
to
you can put that on the
answer.
I don't know, I have no
The
idea.
realtor's making his money from,
Yeah,
you know, I'm not sure it's in the realtor's best interest to
rat
on the,
Yeah, rat them out, right.
I know, it
But
is
that, that's an issue that we don't have to worry about right
Yeah.
now, fortunately.
Right.
So,
It's an interesting one, though. I mean, we have to do the fire smoke detectors, right? So is that an avenue to identify potential sale? There you go.
Right, yeah, some towns actually have the assessor go out with the fire inspectors. Takes a little bit of coordination, but it can be done, so.
any other
One
questions?
question.
Clint?
What's the smallest house that can be built in Milton? Like, what's the square footage?
You know, Joe Prondak would
Yeah.
probably be better to answer that. I know there's some very old houses that are very small.
Right.
Um,
But are they,
I'm not sure if there's a physical size limitation or, you know, minimum. I know there's some awful big ones, but
right, just pricing out the town is what I mean.
thinking of like those mobile homes, some of the,
Just regular homes,
Yeah.
just, you know, pricing, you know, we're pretty much building these big houses that people are not able to
What-
afford after some time.
that's a great question, but I think it's really an economics issue because land right now is so valuable. If you have a buildable lot in
yeah.
Milton, it's worth, you know, the sales I'm seeing, at least $500,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No matter what size it is, you look at Jill Kathleen Lane, they're roughly 6,000-7,000, maybe 10,000 square feet. And they're putting up, you know, selling for $1.1 million, $1.2 million. So the land is worth
Yeah.
easily half that. So in order to make your money back, you can't put up a small house. So it's, that's why they're building such big homes.
Any further questions? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept these,
I'll move to
approve the
approve
position.
the position of inspector,
Appraisal technician.
appraisal technician.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Thanks for your time. That's okay.
Thank
It's very
you.
interesting
Thank you.
to hear.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we have no new business, I imagine that our next job is to wait for reappointment by the town moderator.
We may not be.
One, could we make the first thing we do, and we don't have to do it now, but maybe when we reconvene,
Yep.
to discuss what worked last year, what didn't work last year, what we'd like to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, a debrief.
I mean,
on
the
that
one
process.
thing, the one thing that I know that, you know, bothered me and a lot of people is not looking at any financial
Yes.
data, no spreadsheet, no.
Yes.
That was very disturbing.
We didn't get disclosure till the very end in some
It was
cases.
very much
Not
year-over-year
enough.
change, historical trend. But
Yeah,
there wasn't
yeah.
data.
Well, simply, we'll make that request. It's as simple as that. We can make that request right now.
The general, we had so many new members this year, too. It's difficult. And when I saw, you know, we have 3 new Board of Selectmen, and I remember one of them said, how do we never, you know, they're doing a whole day program, like to learn about what to do, I suppose. It would be nice if there was some type of thing for new members to kind of go and understand it a little bit more. But I know we don't have.
I've done this for a year and I still don't understand it.
See?
so.
So how do we enrich that for all of
To
the
be
members?
honest, the best thing is
Do
that annual meeting
Yeah,
for the.
we should make
town
sure
finance.
that,
November.
Yeah.
October, I think,
November, is
yeah.
it? Yeah.
Maggie,
That
so I
might
can
be
share
it.
that?
no, we don't have, we just go, we just
We're
go.
making fair something.
I wonder if they would.
Love it.
George, could we inquire about an update to the
postmortem
5-year
as executive
projection?
session.
Well, we literally just talked about that. Absolutely, I'm sorry that you weren't part of the discussion.
all
but That
around.
was one of our
Strategy.
our first
So we
agenda
don't
items
have
of
to
the
convene a
new
meeting
meeting for the next
before.
year.
Tom will be
Absolutely.
happy to know that. Did
What's
you
that?
hear what he asked?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't what?
5-year projection.
See, he
Give
didn't
an
know that you
update.
asked for that.
Yeah.
As far as the date of it, you're right about having to wait until we're actually reappointed.
Right.
We don't jump over our skis. But the date of the next meeting, I think, is actually required,
It's
it's
in the
actually
bylaws.
set by the bylaws.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like it's
First
July
July,
something or
something.
other.
July?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I do not know exactly what that date is, but we should find out what it is.
It's online.
It's on my
As long as it's not July 11th, then we're good.
I hope it's not July 11th. We will check on the exact required date for that next meeting and send it around. And I imagine we'll all have to go to that I don't know whether that's the date before or after we're reappointed, if we are reappointed. If then any of you do not wish to be reappointed, please communicate that and I can forward
So
it.
what do we do about members that aren't here?
We'll send out an email and
You
just
you
tell
said
them
we
what's
should
happening.
talk about that stuff, right?
Well, we have to talk about that as
Yeah.
well. Just some membership who is unable to come for a certain number of meetings may not be
That's
interested in
important.
continuing,
Yeah.
but we need to have a steady
Vote them
number.
off the island.
Something like that, but we will have that conversation as well. But if there's no other business, I thank you all very much for the very, very excellent work you did this year. Very positive commentary came back on a lot of the work that we did, so thank you again. And so, that being said, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
I love you guys.